particularly the entrepreneurs watching, I want you guys to understand this, because you may fall into the trap that I fell into when I was younger by reading about, reading all these books about, your why is really important. And it's absolutely true, don't get me wrong, it is really important. But the question is, after your why, very soon after, you need to answer the how. Like, how am I going to do this, right? I mean, it's really good to identify your why, but then after that, you're going to be like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
I'm like, I feel really empowered. Wow, I'm so motivated. I'm so amazingly, I'm so psyched up about this journey. I just quit my job. I'm starting up my thing. This is my co-founder. That's my other co-founder. We've got a great idea. We're going to do this. And then we're like, okay, so now what? Now what do we do, right? So my point is that when you are creating a brand, start with the why, definitely, but understand in your mind that that is literally 2-3% of your journey.
Right.
Understand that the next 10% of that journey is really being able to get into the details of the how.
Welcome to the Achievers Show, where our goal at the show is to bring to you some of the world's top achievers for you to learn from their mindset and strategies in order for you to achieve success in your life as well. Now, Steve Jobs once said, the most powerful person in the world is actually a storyteller, because a storyteller set the vision, the values, and the agenda for the entire generation to come. Now, in today's session, our guest today, he is considered by many in Asia as a master storyteller. As a 3-time Tedx speaker, he has spoken at over 200 events since 2013 on topics such as brand leadership, intergenerational dynamics, digital disruption, and workplace EQ. He was also awarded as Best LinkedIn Influencer by Malaysia Social Media Week. Marketing in Asia's magazine listed him as one of the top 43 inspirational LinkedIn icons to follow in 2018. He has interacted and consulted for several organizations such as Google, Allianz, Sime Darby, CIMB, Maybank, and many more. Now today, he is here to share with us the 5 keys to create an inspiring story brand. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Dr.A.J Minai. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much. Our first question to you is, why not start off a little bit about telling our audience what do you actually do and how do you actually start off your entrepreneurship journey?
Okay, that's a great question, Shui. First things first, I want to thank you for inviting me to this platform. And secondly, I want to do a shout out to Shui. He's doing some amazing stuff. He's only 22 years old. I was telling him that when I was 22, I had no idea what I was doing in my life. So thank you very much, Shui, and it is truly commendable to have youth like you.
Thank you.
Now, that being said, getting back to my journey as an entrepreneur. My journey as an entrepreneur began very young. I always felt from a very young age that I could sell ice to an Eskimo, simply because of the way I could interact with people. And so that led me to my first very big mistake of thinking that I am fit for sales. And I dedicated the first 10 to 12 years of my corporate career to sales and business development. And that took me on a journey of self-discovery, because during the process of going through a sales career, and a very high-flying one, because I was doing tremendously well, not to show off, but I'm just telling the truth, being objective, right? I realized that, there's a lot more to life than just chasing a check. A salesman life is very, I would say, treacherous. Yeah. It's very treacherous, because as a salesperson, all you live for and eat and breathe and sleep is the next check and the next deal that you're going to close, right? Now, when I was a kid right out of college, I did computer science, I did my master's in tech, and I was thinking, man, the last thing I want to do is I want to sit behind a computer screen and program for the rest of my life. Even if it is working for a company like Microsoft or Google, I don't want to be behind a computer screen. So what's the one thing that, a kid right out of college can do who can fairly talk around people? So I'm thinking, what can I do, right? What can I do? Now, everything else from engineering to doctors to anything else that you do requires a degree when you apply for a job, right? I can't apply for an engineering firm because I'm not an engineer. Yeah. So I'm thinking, what can I possibly apply for that doesn't require a degree if I don't want to do the same thing that I studied? Which, by the way, more than 50% of the people around the world today do. They don't end up doing what they studied, they end up doing something completely different, right? And that was sales.
Right.
right? What you know, you go to any sales organization, and whether you're a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, a high school dropout, it doesn't matter. As long as you can sell, they'll hire you, right? And so my first job was in sales, and then I got hooked. I got addicted because I was doing really well in it. And therein lies my biggest mistake. Not a regret, but a mistake that I made, that I learned from, because I spent the next 10 years building a career around that. And you know, that was an amazing career, you know, fast life, fast cars, a lot of girls, a lot of money. And you know, when I was probably about 2-3 years older than you, I was earning more than a CEO because of the commissions that I was earning in US dollars. But I would say it corrupted me, right? It really changed me in many ways. And I think I do regret that aspect of things, right? While the overall decision to get into sales very early on was a mistake, the biggest regret that I had was the people that I hurt along that journey, and not truly understanding what my real calling in life is. And that calling was to be able to use my voice, not to sell and get a check, but to use my voice to inspire others and to help people, right? To unlock themselves. Because quite frankly, between the age of 9 to 16, Shui, I was bullied nonstop. I was made fun of. I was in exile in school, right? What you see today is not what you saw back when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I was scrawny, I used to stammer. Nobody liked me, right? I was a horrible student. You know, forget about A's. I got 12 out of 100 on maths, right? I was a horrible student, right? But there's the beauty. When the universe takes away something from you, it gives back something too. What did it give back to me? I didn't have a very strong IQ, but what it gave me was an EQ, right? What happens when you're scared of spending time with anybody in school? When you're not popular like the other kids, and you're not invited to all the parties, and you know, all the girls aren't crazy about you and all that stuff as a boy growing up, what do? You obviously hide away. You always get away from people because you know the guys in your class are going to beat up on you. So what do? You try to get away, and that's what I did. I would go away and hide in different spots in school alone, and I would often be there watching people behind the bleachers, and you know, just watching people, because nobody really wanted to be my friend, so I had no friends. So my biggest friend was me, myself, and my emotional intelligence grew without me even knowing it, and that's where I became. I guess that's the beginning of AJ, because despite everything that happened, at that time as a child, I was so desperate to fit in. As children, we're so desperate to fit into things, right? Fit into our groups, our social groups, fit into our family units, fit into everything, right? Belong. But the truth is, nobody's actually ever meant to fit in. We're all meant to stand out, right? That's really what I feel it is, right? And as a child growing up in the education system, and don't get me started on education. I mean, education has a long way to go, man. But as a child growing up, and then eventually becoming a man, I realized that life is really about showcasing how different you are. Because in an ocean of digital, in an ocean of a population of billions of people, in an ocean of industries in which almost every second person calls themselves a storyteller, right? Which I do too. But how do you differentiate yourself? By being unique. And I don't mean unique as in U-N-I-Q-U-E. I mean unique as in Y-O-U-N-I-Q-U-E. There's nobody else like you, Shui. Just like there's nobody else like AJ on this planet. People don't run with that. They don't run with that. What they're really busy doing, most people in life, is trying to emulate other people, trying to be someone else. You know? I always tell people, you can learn from everyone, but follow no one. Follow you. Be you. Because trust me, there's no one else who can do as good a job at being you than you, right? I think that's the first step in any entrepreneurial journey. Having this unwavering belief in your own uniqueness. Again, Y-O-U-N-I-Q-U-E, right? So.
Well, that's only the first question, and for me, I really gained a lot from you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so before we talk about the 5 tips that you shared about building a unique, inspiring brand, can you share with us, like, why is building an inspiring brand story important?
That was, oh man, your questions are getting better and better, bro. All right, so People have become brands and brands have become people now.
Right.
Okay, let's take a few examples. You'll meet a lot of people who follow Jack Ma,
Yeah.
who really like Jack Ma. But you'll be surprised, a lot of those people don't know that he owns and runs Alibaba, right?
Okay.
You meet a lot of people who follow Richard Branson, who really look up to him, who click and double click his, they're the memes they see of Richard Branson, right? But they have no idea that he runs and owns Virgin,
Yeah.
right? Probably a bit more of a far out example, but you even know people who know AirAsia, right? And they haven't made the connection between AirAsia and Tony Fernandez yet, right? But that's a very small demographic of people. Most people would know Tony first and then AirAsia, right? Or vice versa. But my point is, people have become brands and brands have become people. And therein lies the reason why brand storytelling is so important today. Because the vast majority of any country's economy, the economy's lifeblood in any country is built up of the SME, the small to medium enterprises, right? It isn't the multinationals or it isn't necessarily the startup economy that's really holding down the whole fort of the country's lifeblood. The real engine and the real growth in any business or any country's business in terms of their overall demographic is really the SME sector, the small to medium enterprises, right? You've got everything from 30-man companies all the way up to a couple of hundreds or even thousands around the country, but they're still small to medium enterprises, right? My point there is, how many CEOs do you know of small to medium enterprises, Shudi? Or how many have you met that truly take storytelling seriously?
Not a lot, I would say.
I rest my case, right? Brand storytelling is the most important thing because every company in the future, and when I say future is so relative, right? The future in Malaysia possibly means 10 to 20 years from now, but that same future that I'm talking about could mean 10 years for Singapore, could mean 5 years for Hong Kong, could mean next year for the US. We don't know, right?
Right.
When it comes to trends and things changing in the market, every country takes its own time to evolve into that market, right?
Right.
But I can say, as someone who's researched this, who spends a lot of time doing digital trend analysis around what's happening in the market, what's moving, and developing a predictive ability to see things that people don't quite see yet that will happen in the future, particularly from a disruption point of view. And that's what I really love doing as a storyteller. Because as a storyteller, you need to be able to tell stories that captivate people, that mesmerize people, right? That engage people. But if your stories are boring, then nobody will listen, right? You know what I mean?
Yes.
So as a futurist, that builds my storytelling capability, right? Because I have more knowledge to share about it. One of the things that you're talking about, which is what you brought up, brand storytelling, is not something that is old. It's not something old. We've been telling stories since time past. It's since we were in the Stone Age. Stone Age cavemen have been drawing things on walls to make sense of things. Now, for some reason, the corporate world made us forget the value of emotional, social selling tools, right? Now, when I say selling, a lot of people think about, oh, you're talking about the pitch, AJ. No, a story isn't a pitch. A brand story isn't a pitch. A brand story is something that you use to allow your consumer markets, your targeted markets, to feel something about your brand. Not just think about it, but feel something about it, right? If we're living in a noisy landscape where every second brand is competing with the next, right? If we accept the fact that social media has desensitized ourselves to so many different advertising tools, right? You see adverts being thrown at you every second of the day. You walk out, you see a digital signage with an ad on it. Yeah. You open your phone up on Instagram, you see an ad about somebody selling something. You go to LinkedIn, you see somebody selling something, right? From a product to a software to anything, right? My point is, we are perpetually in a state of being bombarded with the world around us using digital to sell to us.
Right.
How do you differentiate yourself in that landscape if you're not going to use storytelling, right? Because storytelling is the means for you to be able to humanize your business.
Yeah.
to connect people. Same reason why RHB during Diwali, just this past Diwali, just this last one, during Diwali, or Deepavali, to say sometimes, why would a bank make a Deepavali video about Dr. Teddy? Dr. Teddy is a doctor who has a mobile medical unit, goes around, the whole of KL, helping out kids. He takes care of kids. He's an amazing man, right? I have immense respect for him.
Right.
But you got to ask yourself, why would RHB Bank make a story about Dr. Teddy? What possible advantage or gain would they gain from putting Dr. Teddy commercially?
Yep.
What would they gain from that? If you really think about it, at the naked eye level, at a high level, people don't really see it. But what they don't understand is RHB is driving home a human feel-good aspect of positioning their bank in a more favorable position psychologically amongst Malaysian people when they create that connection between Dr. Teddy and themselves. Right? Same reason why Maxis does it, same reason why Petronas does it. You know these ads I'm talking about. They never once show a mobile phone or a Maxis package plan on Maxis's ads around Christmas, New Year's, or Diwali, or Chinese New Year. It's always about family, it's always a story, right? And that's where brands are going. And that is why, if you want to stand out, you need to start building a brand and a business storytelling pivot.
Right, I totally agree with you, whereby there's this saying, people don't buy based on logic, people buy based on the emotions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so everything that we do, we are actually playing with the emotions, right?
Correct.
Right, okay, so the 5 keys to building an inspiring brand story.
Right.
What do you think is the first key for you?
Wow. Okay, so there are quite a few keys, and I remember I wrote an article about this, and you brought that to my attention. I write a lot of articles, so I'm sorry, Shuyi, I forgot which article you were talking about. But the article that you brought to my attention, I listed out 10 keys, right? But I'm just going to pick 5, and I'm going to go through them, and I might rename them or rehash them into for the sake of the show, right? So the first thing is, one is truly understanding that your why. A lot of times people talk about the why, right? And you've probably heard this many a times too, because you seem like a learned young man, right? You seem like someone who reads a lot, right? Given the fact that you've written your own book, I'm sure you do,
Thank you.
right? Simon Sinek talks about always starting with your why, right? Now here's my problem with that. It isn't practical, right? I mean, yes, it's really important to start with your why. Don't get me wrong. Purpose is everything in life. I completely agree. I'm a storyteller, so trust me, beyond, if anyone at all would believe in using conceptual feelings towards building a brand pitch or a brand story, it would be me as a storyteller. But I recognize the fact that when you say always start with your why, it is just a tip of the iceberg. Right? What do I mean by that? Now, I'm framing this in the frames of an entrepreneurial frame, right? Because this show is all about empowering entrepreneurs, right? Particularly the entrepreneurs watching. I want you guys to understand this, because you may fall into the trap that I fell into when I was younger by reading about, reading all these books about, your why is really important. And it's absolutely true. Don't get me wrong. It is really important. But the question is, after your why, very soon after, you need to answer the how.
Yes.
Like, how am I going to do this? Right? I mean, it's really good to identify your why, but then after that, you're going to be like, okay, now what? I'm like, I feel really empowered. Wow, I'm so motivated. I'm so amazingly, I'm so psyched up about this journey. I just quit my job. I'm starting up my thing. This is my co-founder. That's my other co-founder. We've got a great idea. We're going to do this. And then we're like, okay, so now what? Now what do we do? Right? So my point is that when you are creating a brand, start with the why, definitely, but understand in your mind that that is literally 2-3% of your journey. Right. Understand that the next 10% of that journey is really being able to get into the details of the how. How can I do this? I've got this purpose. I'll give you a fantastical example that I used in the article. Right? Imagine you're the next Elon Musk and you want to take people to the stars. Let's just say you want to create a new world on Neptune, right? And your company is like, I'm going to transport people from here to Earth to Neptune to take us to the new world, okay? Now, why? Because I believe that space is the next frontier. Okay, that's great.
Right.
Okay, that's your why. Because I believe, and I am going to be the first space entrepreneur. That's my why. Okay, and I want to be able to show people that the sky is actually not the limit. I can do anything, right? And we can do this. And you create an inspiring brand story out of that. But here's the thing: after all that's done, how are you going to truly transport people from Earth to Neptune? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
See, this is where there's a huge pitfall in the market, right? And this leads me to my next point. But before I get there, I want to conclude this point, which is your why is just the tip of your iceberg. Right. Always remember that, guys. The why is really good to be in for about maybe 1 or 2 hours in a day if you want to talk about 24 hours, but the rest of the time has to be about, let's get into the detail, let's roll up our sleeves, let's talk about building an actual formidable business plan that's practical. That's practically sound, that allows you very clearly and very simply understand how are you going to actually take the steps from now till then to achieve that why, that glorious why that you have. Right? You want to say something?
Yeah. So like you mentioned, the first step is to first identify your why, right?
Yeah.
So how should we identify that why to make it like align with the how that we do? Because let's say if we set our why, like you say, going to space, transporting people to space, if that why is too big, then you can't do the how definitely.
Definitely.
So how can you align these two together?
So I think the way that you can align it is simply by spending time in a more of a design thinking sort of a positioning in your mind, right? So one thing that I really think is very important is feedback groups.
Okay.
So what I did for a lot of my startups and a lot of my ventures was that I spent time in the beginning stages of my ideas. Even though I thought it was a good idea, I always recognized that it could just be me. I could just be thinking it's a great idea, but I need to start getting market feedback. I need to get people, and the market feedback comes from sampling different type of personalities. So what I do is, because I've got a really large network, right, on LinkedIn, sometimes I would reach out to people on LinkedIn and I would invite them to my office and make it a day, right, where I would present the idea at a very, very high level, not to give away IP and to be worried about somebody else stealing my idea, but just present that idea and then present a tagline from a marketing perspective and talk about the why and talk about the how as well as how I understand it, right? And then I would get the different people to just throw out their raw ideas, right? Just throw out raw ideas. Now, you might ask me, AJ, some of us don't have big networks, so what do we do? Easy. Just identify 5 or 10 of your friends, right? Just do me a favor and make sure that you pick friends that are not in the same circle of friends, right? Don't get guys like who are your best friends, all 3 of them who know each other and know you. So it doesn't make it very diverse. Try to pick a couple of different type of friends, invite them over, buy them pizza so they're attracted to come over, and during that time present your why, even if it's glorious or even if it's outrageous like you said. Okay, it's fine, doesn't matter. Present the why, then present the how you see it, right? And then ask them, what do you think of this? And let them tear it apart. Let them tear it apart and tell you what they think, right? Do this a few times with different sets of people, right? Do this with the younger crowd. Do this with a middle-aged crowd. Then go to maybe your grandfather and ask him. You'll be surprised the type of feedback you'll get from different type of people. They'll see things that you don't see, right? And therefore, for me in the beginning, the why and the how can be made more reasonable by exposing it to people you trust. You see what I mean? That's my suggestion. Because too many co-founders get really obsessed with their own ideas and they kind of just begin the journey really without really checking in with anybody else, right? They're like, oh no, it's a great idea. Don't you think so? Totally. Don't you think so too? But this is his co-founder. Obviously it's a good idea. But nobody else outside this room even knows it, right? And that's probably why 9 out of 10 startups fail. Because the beginnings of those startups, in more cases than not, are like this, where people don't actually validate their ideas within the market at a very, very early stage. Right. So that's my advice.
Okay, so it's always to go out to the market and validate your idea before starting, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so what is the second key to building an inspiring personal brand?
Okay. Value.
Okay.
Now, this is where, as a storyteller, I'm very, very particular about one thing when it comes to storytelling. Storytelling can be used as a force of good to really breathe life into a brand, so that it can take off.
Yeah.
Right? But storytelling can also be very dangerous, because if you use storytelling inauthentically, and it's not authentic, you stand a chance of building a huge hype around a brand that truly doesn't deliver.
Right.
And that's really dangerous. So I want to talk about the second point here, is really building in value. At the end of the day, no matter how much you want to spin it from a marketing perspective, no matter how many storytelling campaigns you want to run, no matter how many incentives or beautiful visuals you want to put out there, right? At the end of the day, what you say in the market and you're hyping up there on social media and buzzing about has to deliver in real life. Right? That's one thing really, really important, because I've realized we live in an age of social media where we kind of convince ourselves that we're doing a great job hyping and building the brand, not just personally as personal influencers, but also our respective ventures, right? And it's like, wow, awesome. Imagine Gary Vaynerchuk. He's amazing, right? He's an amazing influencer. People look up to him. But imagine if somebody signs up with VaynerMedia and then has a shit experience.
Right.
Can you imagine? That's what I'm saying. So the reason why Gary is successful is not just because of the hype that he puts out there. It's not just because of the branding, the personal branding, and the content creation he does. A lot of the younger generation, and I'm saying this including myself because I'm a millennial, right? I'm obviously a lot older than you are. I'm in my early 30s, right? But I can tell you right now, one of the biggest mistakes both the younger 20s, the mid-20s, all the way up to the 30s is making right now in the market, is that we are so obsessed with the ability to spin our ideas as the next Uber or as the next Facebook or as the next big thing, that we sometimes get blindsided with the attention to detail that we need to put in to actually deliver an experience that matches the hype. Right. That's the second thing about brand storytelling, right?
Right. I believe that that's really important, is because with the digital in the digital age, there are a lot of people who call themselves influencers, but not a lot of them can actually deliver the values that you're talking about.
Absolutely. And that's how I keep myself in check too, right? I mean, until 2019, I never called myself an influencer. And then, Malaysia Social Media Week announced me as 2019's best LinkedIn influencer. And that's when it first time clicked to me, oh, okay, apparently I'm an influencer. I didn't know that, right? But you're absolutely right. An influencer isn't someone who has a plethora of followers. That's not how I measure people. I don't measure influencers in the market or anywhere in the world. I don't call anybody who positions themselves an influencer as someone who has thousands and hundreds of thousands of followers. I see an influencer, even if that one person has an impact on one other person, that person is an influencer, right? Because the influence comes from substance, not just from style.
Right.
So people always say, oh, AJ, this whole influencer marketing thing, it seems to be a lot of style over substance. And I always say, I think you should reword that. I think what you should look at is, there's no harm in having style, and there's no harm in having a bit of a glam, but you know what you should do? You should do style powered by substance.
Right.
You see what I mean?
That would be extremely powerful.
Style powered by substance. It doesn't need to be style over substance. You can be stylish, you can be glam, you can be swag, but make sure that you measure up to what you're putting out there. Right? So you look certain way, AJ, you dress certain way, AJ, but are you truly delivering value to people the same way? That's how I keep myself in check. Right? And that's how I think entrepreneurs need to keep themselves in check. So, that's number one. Number two. Number three, which is, I think, something that a lot of us kind of just miss, right? But it's a very, very important point, is team members. Your partners, right? So let's talk about it from a frame of entrepreneurship. Your co-founders. I know this is going to sound harsh, but pick your co-founders not because of friendship. Not because of intimacy. Not because of the fact that you all went to school together, right? Pick your co-founders because you truly see a strength and weakness matrix that will shoulder each other. Right? Make sure you pick the right people for the right role, and no matter how long it takes, run through that journey. Go through that journey. Don't just settle and say, oh, you know what? you know, he's a buddy of mine. He kind of knows Python. Let's just make him my CTO. Yeah, you know, she's a friend of mine. Yeah, she seems to have done a few sales jobs. Let's just make her the head of sales. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A lot of times I've seen this happen a lot, right? Where people kind of make excuses for other people, particularly people who are close to them, right? They kind of cover for other people. And then, you know what? 1-2 years later, when the shit has hit the fan and times are hard, they've completely forgotten that one of the biggest issues that they're facing at that moment is the fact that they did not pick the right mix and the ratio to begin with.
Right.
They did not specifically look into their strengths and weaknesses or do a SWOT on each other objectively to see whether or not this trio or this, you know, whatever, 4 people, 1 person, 2 people, whatever that trio is or whatever that group is, right? Do those people shoulder and complement one another?
Right. Okay.
Right. So I'm sure, Shui, you can back me up on this.
Yeah.
How many people do you know who are running startups today who intentionally, specifically, were conscious about the people they brought on as co-founders, as opposed to having history with them emotionally, whether it's their best friend or it's somebody they knew or somebody they met that referred them to someone else. Oh, this guy's good. You should just hook up with them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Right? That's a third thing. So your team members.
So I know you have started a lot of successful businesses. How do you actually pick the right team member?
You're absolutely right. You brought up a good point, Shui. You can never know 100%.
Yeah.
You're right. Okay? There's no way that I can know for 100%, but as long as I put in an effort, as long as I'm not completely blind to it, right? As long as I'm not making those mistakes where I'm literally going like, hey man, you and I have known each other for 10 years. Do you want to become my co-founder sort of thing, you know?
Yeah.
It's true, you know, if that co-founder you've known for 10 years, don't get me wrong, if he happens to have the strengths and the weaknesses that you feel would complement your own, right? If I know that, for example, I've got my COO, whose name is Ryan. I've talked about him on LinkedIn a few times, right? Ryan's a great buddy. I've known him for about 12, 13 years now. And it's true. The reason why me and Ryan work together, not only are we lucky enough to have brotherhood, but we're also lucky enough to have a very clear boundary and demarcation of my strengths and my weaknesses, and his strengths and his weaknesses. And the fact that we can complement each other, that's why the businesses work.
Right.
The businesses don't just work because he's my brother.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? So the way you should know is probably 1, patience, right? I see a lot of people when they've got a great idea for a startup or they've got a great idea for a business in general, they really want to rush it, right?
Yeah.
And I think the number one narrative that comes out from that is, oh, I got to do it before someone else does it,
Yeah.
right? You know, I can't be the next Uber in this industry if I don't do it, and somebody else will think of it, right? Yeah, you know what? If that's going to happen, it's going to happen with or without your competition in the market, right? So, in my opinion, what you really need to do is spend time building a core team. The one that you can really believe in, the one that you know can go the long term with you, right?
Right.
And that can't happen overnight. That has to happen with a bit of patience. You do need to get to know that person. You do need to go through trials with them.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know, maybe during market validation, spend more time with them, get to know them, see them, observe them. Let them do the same. I'm not saying it from a pretentious way. It's not just you. Let them look at you too. Let them work it out because you've got weaknesses, I've got weaknesses, right? That's the only way I can advise it, right?
Yeah.
I wish there was a magical formula that I could tell you that all of a sudden, if you do this, you will know. No, it doesn't work that way. We're
Right.
human beings. We don't know, right? It may work out, it may not, but just at least be conscious of it.
Yeah.
Be aware of it, right?
Yeah, I think also Jack Ma said something that people are the main drivers for companies to succeed.
Absolutely, right?
Really powerful.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you.
So after you have a team, what's next? What's the 4th key?
The 4th key, oh man. The 4th key is something that is very close to my heart as a storyteller. Make sure that when you have a vision, your why becomes your vision eventually, right? But your vision has to be translated into a brand story, right? We talked about this earlier. We talked about how, you know, while you might have a vision of helping people in a particular way with a particular product or service, but at the same time, when you build your brand story, right, make sure that everybody within your brand, within that company, is selling and believing in the same story.
Right.
Right? So, for example, let's just say you and I start a business tomorrow, Shui,
Yeah.
right? Now, you are the CEO and I am the COO, okay? Now, imagine you go to a networking event and you have a positioning of a different type of storytelling angle,
Yeah.
and I go to a different event and I tell them a completely different story angle, right? And you're saying that, you know, what we do is we take these lemons and we paint them red for you, right? And then I go up to other people in the event, like, we take these lemons and make sure they don't stay yellow for you. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're saying we paint them red, and I say we make sure that they don't stay yellow, right? Even the slightest difference can confuse the market.
Yeah.
So making sure that your vision is aligned,
Right.
right? I'm giving you an example through, obviously, a silly example of lemons, but obviously what I mean is the alignment. Make sure that there's an alignment across the organization. Even if you're starting off as a two-man company, make sure that you constantly align with one another, right? And then sooner or later, when that two-man company becomes 20, it becomes even more important that you need to align.
Right.
And as storytellers, the leadership shouldn't just be the storytellers. Everyone in the organization needs to become a storyteller.
Right.
Right? So, for example, you take Brian, who runs Future Lab, right? You must have heard of Future
Yeah.
Labs, right? So Brian's a great example of an entrepreneur that's really, really succeeded in creating a good culture within his organization, because everybody in Future Labs says and speaks the same rhetoric and the same lingo that Brian does.
Right.
So he's done a great job, you see what I mean? But a lot of leadership doesn't take the time to look into these things. You know why? Because they're so busy thinking about revenue and money all the time. They're not thinking about creating a real culture,
Yeah.
right? So the fourth key is really being able to ensure that people are aligned.
Right.
Not just at a mind level, but at a heart level,
I see.
right? Are you there just because you need to be there? Or are you there because you really want to be there? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's something that you really need to look into. And I've noticed that for the younger generation, including myself, I made a few mistakes when I was younger, thinking that, oh, it's really important that we're going to make a shitload of money together. Pardon my French, right? But that's not really the point. At one point you realize that the money comes if you do a really good job at what you're doing.
Right.
Right? The money and the financial aspects of things, don't get me wrong, having a CFO is a must. You must have somebody who's looking at the financial modeling of your business. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you shouldn't care about money. I want to make that clear to the audience. You should, because you need to have a financial model. Your purpose cannot just be a purpose that's not profitable. Make sure that you build a profitable purpose in life, right? But what I'm saying is, your end goal and your be-all should not just be money. Your end goal and be-all should be providing value to the market. And if you do that beautifully well, the money will come.
Right.
That's what I'm saying, right? So that's the fourth angle.
Okay.
And the fifth, which is, I think, something that you brought up before the show, is consistent growth, right? It's consistent growth. Like, so the name of the show is
The Achiever Show.
The Achiever Show, right? What is your definition of achievement, right? What I've really realized is, again, within organizations, when they start out as an entrepreneurial setup, and from a brand storytelling point of view, when you're building a brand, personally, I realized that people think of the brand as a separate thing and themselves as a separate thing, the founders themselves.
Right.
They don't understand that they need to humanize themselves. They don't understand that Brian, for example, is the face of Future Labs, and he's done a great job creating that connection, you see? So Brian, Future Labs, so if I think of Future Labs, I think of Brian.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And I also think of some of his other co-founders, right? But my point is, do you see how people have become brands and brands have become people? Gary Vee, VaynerMedia, interchangeable. People think of Gary Vee, they follow Gary Vee, they enjoy Gary Vee, but then when VaynerMedia knocks on their door, if they're a Fortune 500 or any company, do you think selling to those people would be that hard anymore? If they trust and follow Gary Vee already? This is a really big angle that's missing in the market.
Right.
People think of achievement as purely as revenue, as the bottom line of their business. They think of, oh, in the first year, I need to break even. So all their terms of reference in any entrepreneurial startup is always around money and financial growth,
Yep.
right? How quickly can I break even? How quickly can I turn green? All these things. Don't get me wrong, again, important. But in parallel, something that is equally important is making sure that you're not just achieving in the tangibles, in terms of your numbers. You're also achieving in the intangibles. What are the intangibles? How are you building your brand? How is someone going to be able to create the same connection they have for Richard Branson with Virgin to Richard Branson? How can you create that same bridge in your own organization? Every organization needs to start Steve Jobbing their brand.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They need to create that personification, right? How is that going to happen? By building your brand on different social media, right? And I don't mean that in a pretentious way. I don't mean, again, no offense, I don't mean Insta baby way, okay? I'm not talking about, you know, you standing next to a Bentley every 3 days with different cars and different girls, and people think you're living such a flash life and all this stuff. I'm not talking about that type of influencing. What I'm talking about is you delivering true value through content creation, which is what Gary Vee talks about. Gary Vee talks about document versus creation, right? You don't need to create or fake a persona or build something unnatural or unreal about yourself. People want to see the real Shuyi. They want to see the real AJ. So why not document your everyday life, right? For example, right now, I'm on the Achiever Show with Shuyi. I could easily build content around this on LinkedIn about this show and about my experience here, about you, bro. You see what I mean? So a lot of people will come to me and say, but AJ, I don't get invited to shows. I don't get invited to all this stuff. So what do I do? I said, it's easy. You work, don't you? Yeah? Something that happened at the office that stayed with you, that was a lesson for you. Turn that into a post, right? You don't need to create something. You don't go looking for content. You are the content. Your life is content, right? So I really, really recommend, that's why I saved this for the fifth one. I really recommend co-founders in the startup world, CEOs in the SME world, big time chairmen on the boards, in MNCs, and all of you, the entire diaspora, right? Everyone needs to understand that brands have become people, people have become brands, right? People now want to invest and they want to feel something. So if your brand isn't making people feel something, and all you're doing is focusing on the features and not on the feeling, you are not going to be around for very much longer, right? So it's really important. 2-man company or 2 million around the world type of company, huge company, right? Is there any company that has 2 million people in it? I don't think so, right?
I don't think so.
Yeah, sorry. So 2-man company, I'm going to scratch that, re-scratch that, right? 2-man company to 200,000 people. I know there are companies with 200,000 people, right? I think BASF has 200,000 people.
Okay.
Yeah, so companies that are massive or companies that are really small, it doesn't matter. It's not like the small guys can say, oh, I'll just wait till I get bigger, and the bigger guys can say, oh, we'll just wait till, you know, shit hits the fan. It's not like that. Building a brand and humanizing the personal brand of all of the employees, turning them to storytellers, getting them out there, whether it's on Instagram, on TikTok, on LinkedIn, it doesn't matter. It's important that they understand the value of content creation and how that will lead the brand as well as their own personal lives to success.
Right. Okay, so something that I'd like to add on is that while building this brand, the Achiever Show, like what you said, brand are people, people are brands. So one of the things is that when people think of achievers, they see Shuyi as an achiever. That's something relatable to the audience.
Absolutely.
And after that, I interview like top achievers like Dr.A.J yourself. So people see you as an achiever as well. So this is something that they can relate. And what we want to also do is that we want to create a community of achievers so that people will know that they have the ability to achieve more and more things in their life. Yeah, that is something that we want to do.
I just want to just probably put in a small thing there. You know, it's really important to understand that life is not just about achieving the physical and the tangibles, but it's also about achieving more of what's inside as well. Do you know what I mean, Shuyi? So, you know, while I respect any platform that pushes people's limits, like this platform. Shuyi's doing a great job. At 22 years old, he's already got his own show, he's got his own book. I mean, this guy's gonna be a box office hit, you know, because it's gonna be huge, right? But my point is, even Shuyi or even AJ, despite the success they may have tangibly, they need to pay attention to the intangibles.
Yes.
Right? The little things in life matter, right? And eventually you'll realize that they catch up with you, right? And I don't want anybody who's younger than me making the same mistakes that I made. You know, during my 20s, I was a complete ass, I'll be honest with you, right? It took a long time for me to become a lot more responsible. And when I did, I changed. And when people said, wow, you've changed. And I said, well, not really. A lot changed me.
Right.
I didn't change. A lot changed me, you know? And so we live our lives, and as we live it day to day, we may feel like nothing's changing. But when you look back, you realize that things are really different. You see what I mean? So thank you again, Shuyi. Thank you for bringing me on here.
No problem, no problem. Our pleasure. Well, also I think just to add on something, that's also what actually motivates me to write this book called When Success Meets Happiness. Because for me, I always believe that success is not just about how much you earn, but it's also about the relationship that you have with people, and most importantly, how happy you are inside you.
Absolutely. Well said.
Thank you so much, and I believe all of you here have really learned so much from this show and from Dr. AJ as well.
Thank you.
With that, thank you so much for watching.
Thank you guys.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for watching the Achiever Show. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our channel so that you can get first-hand update on our show, where we'll be releasing 2 episodes every month to help you to unleash your deepest potential. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and stay extraordinary. I'll see you the next time.